What's going on, guys? I don't know how many people follow my Instagram page over here and how many don't, but I got 2 end tables in, and once I got done putting them all together, like everything, you have to dispose of the cardboard boxes. So I needed to go ahead and break down the boxes, and that just kind of led me back to this K390 and just how impressed I am by it, honestly. I didn't sharpen this knife. This is a CRK Chris Reeve knives, Impinda. Their slip joint, I think Bill Harsey designed. If he didn't design the entire knife, he designed the locking mechanism, but that's a entirely different story. I used this when I was because I had this in my pocket Friday. I work in an office, so this works for that task. Nice blade shape, thin behind the edge, a point with a fine tip that allows you to kind of get into whatever it is you want to pierce. So that's kind of what I was using this for. I was using it to pierce the packaging and cut it open, in the internal packaging. But once I got to breaking down the box, obviously I needed a blade longer than this. So that's when my K390 Endura came out, and you can see, you can see both of these are a little bit dirty. Like I said, this was just opening the package and then opening the packaging with inside the package. And then I used this to break down the entire both of the boxes, which, like, I don't think I said, but the boxes were kind of unique. They kind of were like, if you've ever gotten an iPhone or something like that, the top slides over the bottom and you have to kind of pull the 2 halves apart. So really it was like 4 double-sided boxes I had to break down. They were probably 24 inches by 24 inches by maybe, I don't know, 12 to 18 inches high. So there were 4 of those that I had to end up breaking down. The knife, it just performed. I know there's a lot of talk about, just the general geometry of the full flat ground Endura, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a conversation for another day. Which, not that you can purely separate steel performance from geometry. I'll say that because I know, some people will make those comments. The 2 are not mutually exclusive. Yes, geometry does aid with cutting and steel performance, but just speaking directly to the steel and not getting too much into the other attributes too much, I'm just impressed by this steel. I've used my Veneve diamond stones. I believe they are the Dragons. I think those are the ones that are twice as thick as the normal stones. I usually start off with the, and now I'm gonna forget. I have the 120 or 140s, and then the 220s or 240s, and then the 400, the 800, I think it's 1,000 and 2,000 or 2,000 and 4,000. It doesn't matter, but usually I stop around that 400 or 800 grit finish, and then I strop with 1 micron diamond spray, CBN spray. Again, I know some people will will get into that debate as well. On a smooth leather strop, it's an emulsion, if that means anything to you, but this is the kind of finish, let's see if I can get that on the camera. This is the kind of finish that you get on the edge with that progression and with that stone. There you go. I think that's a little bit better. So you can see it is, I wouldn't say it's a pure mirror finish. It's a semi-mirror finish, I would say. Pretty close. And that's just the nature of the stone. It does have that toothiness, and I'll show you, even after breaking down all of those boxes, and this is kind of an old guy trick. Old timers would put a knife on their thumbnail or your fingernail, and you kind of, let's see if I can get this focused. You would kind of just push it down to see if it would bite, but I did it a little bit more, so you can see it just rolled up a little piece of my fingernail. That is still after breaking down all of those boxes. And I think I even used it for some other stuff before that. Not a bunch, but some stuff. And it just feels like it just barely broke the fine apex straight off of those stones in that strop. This steel, man, it really is just impressive. There was a lot of talk when I asked about the when I talked about Chris Reeve, the 21, and then when I circled back and asked what is better steel, there was a lot of talk about toughness. Toughness generally refers to lateral stability. So if I'm going to bend this knife left or right, think about it like a fixed blade knife for camping or something like that. If I'm going to baton it through some wood with some knots, that blade is going to bend back and forth. So I want a tough blade. That's why a lot of times you'll see quote unquote tough steels, and that's why a lot of times you'll see like an Essie knife. It's run 55, 56 HRC, somewhere in that ballpark, to increase that toughness, that lateral stability. And again, that gets off into elastic deformation, plastic deformation, blah, 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 blah. If you want to hear about that, go over to Sean's page, Big Brown Bear. He'll walk you through all that stuff. Or maybe it's Triple B Handmade. I can't remember. He goes by all three of those names. But really what I like about carbon steels, tool steels, and specifically this knife and the K390 is the edge stability, which is 9 times out of 10 what most people are talking about. And that's typically referred to as strength, edge strength, edge stability, just strength in general. You can see I have sharpened this knife maybe 4 or 5 times. The first edge, it did kind of, just like most factory edges, it didn't last the longest. It still lasted longer than most factory edges, but it didn't last super long. I've sharpened the knife probably, I don't know, 5, 6 times since then, on the Veneve, only the Veneve diamond stones. And it's always given me a very crisp edge. It's always formed a relatively small burr, and that burr has always been easy to remove, which is another good sign of a steel that has been processed well. Once that apex has been formed, it is always very crisp. It's always very sharp. It's very sticky. I can't say enough about this knife. It does everything that I want in a knife. And I know I should have probably cleaned this off beforehand, but I think you can even see this is not stainless. That is all tape residue. And I believe you can see even through that tape residue, there is little to no staining. There's no rust. None of that. I do think the other day I looked inside of the the thumb hole, and I think there was some discoloration. I didn't really get a close look at it. So maybe that's a little bit of rust, but I know that that's probably a better view of it right there in the center. It almost looks like a lamination, maybe like a sanmai, like a sandwich blade steel, but that middle layer, it almost looks like, which this is not a sandwiched composition blade, but it's almost like that middle layer is rusting a little bit, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. But what I was saying is Outpost 76 just made a video on that with his Spy 27. I don't remember what model knife it is, but his Spyderco. And, you know, again, that's another good page to look at. A lot of people, when we get into talking about the steel and the performance and all those things, they talk about, they kind of have a lot of questions and things of that nature. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. My dog is about to bark, so that's why I'm kind of rambling. My apologies. But a lot of people, when we get into talking about steel and performance and kind of how are you basing some of these opinions, what's your ballpark, what's your what is your baseline, where are you getting these numbers from, where you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Outpost 76 has an entire spreadsheet of several hundred knives, different companies, different steels, all the information laid out. He does the cut test, all of that stuff. You can kind of see where each steel falls, and even within a specific steel, like say K390, I don't think he has a bunch of K390 examples, but even within a specific steel, S30V is probably a better example. He'll have all the knives he's tested in S30V, and you can kind of see how each one compares, so you can even see the variance within the steel. So good page to check out. But I just wanted to make this video. I didn't mean to make a 10-minute video, but I just wanted to make this video because I'm just impressed by the K390. Like I said, the edge retention, the way it sharpens up, the edge strength, even the corrosion resistance for me, which I don't have a lot of issues with staining or corrosion. But even for me, that this just is, man, and it really makes me think about when I first talked about this knife. I talked about the fact that it costs $140, and I didn't really know if it was worth $140. Now, I will say I do still think that there are some refinements that could be made. Even at this price point, I had to knock down the edges of the blade well here. It was very sharp, which is not, you know, a lot of times we have aesthetic things that we look at and we say, this could be better, that could be better, but it really doesn't make a functional difference. As sharp as those edges were, it definitely was a hot spot, and it definitely was something that I would expect to be addressed in a $140 knife. The other big thing I pointed out is the spine of the blade, and I think you can see there, it's very rough. It almost looks like they just water jetted the blade, the blank, and they kind of just finished the flats and put an edge on it and left the spine however it was. That's a little more aesthetic, but again, at $140, I don't know if it's because it's K390 and maybe it would take a little more time to process that portion of the blade. I don't know. I don't know if that was a corner that was cut to keep price in check, but it would be nice if that was, you know, it at least looked like they attempted to do something with the spine of the blade. But those would be the two main things. You know, of course, it's an Enduro. The centering isn't great. Overall, the general fit and finish isn't great, but for a functional knife at a decent price point with exceptional steel, I really have to ask myself if that $140 is not a pretty decent price. But anyway, I said I didn't want to make a 10-minute video, and now I'm at 12 minutes. I appreciate you guys watching. Remember, a lazy man carries a dull knife.